In the Ottoman Empire, a millet was a separate legal court pertaining to personal law under which a confessional community was allowed to rule itself under its own system. After the Ottoman Tanzimat reforms, the term was used for legally protected religious minority groups, similar to the way other countries use the word nation. The word millet comes from the Arabic word millah and literally means nation. The millet system of Islamic law has been called an example of pre-modern religious pluralism. Concept: the millet system has a long history in the Middle East and is closely linked to Islamic rules on the treatment of non-Muslim minorities living under Islamic dominion. The Ottoman term specifically refers to the separate legal courts pertaining to personal law under which minorities were allowed to rule themselves with fairly little interference from the Ottoman government. The concept was used even before the establishment of the Ottoman Empire for the communities of the Church of the East under the Zoroastrian Sassanid Persia in the 4th century. People were bound to their millets by their religious affiliations, rather than their ethnic origins, according to the millet concept. The head of a millet most often a religious hierarch such as the Greek Orthodox Patriarch of Constantinople or, in earlier times, the Patriarch of the East reported directly to the Ottoman Sultan or the Sassanid king, respectively. The millets had a great deal of power they set their own laws and collected and distributed their own taxes. All that was required was loyalty to the empire. When a member of one millet committed a crime against a member of another, the law of the injured party applied, but the ruling Islamic majority being paramount, any dispute involving a Muslim fell under their Sharia-based law. Later, the perception of the millet concept was altered in the 19th century by the rise of nationalism within the Ottoman Empire. Millets, after the decline of the Assyrian Church of the East in the 14th century, until the 19th century beside the Muslim millet, the main millets were the Rum millet, Jewish, Armenian and Syrian Orthodox. Armenians formed more than one millets under the Ottoman rule. A wide array of other groups such as Catholics, Karaites and Samaritans was also represented. Muslims Muslim communities prospered under the Ottoman Empire, as the Sultan was also the Caliph. Ottoman law did not recognize such notions as ethnicity or citizenship. Thus, a Muslim of any ethnic background enjoyed precisely the same rights and privileges. The Muslim millet united different populations regardless of ethnic and linguistic distinctions: Turkish, Arab, Kurdish, Albanian and speakers of Caucasian languages. However, even if caliphate played a significant role, the real existence of these feelings is questionable long before the Arab Revolt and the subsequent dissolution of the empire in the 20th century. By the 17th century, the Maghreb regencies were only nominally under Ottoman control and Egypt was almost independent by the beginning of the 19th century. Creeds which were seen as deviant forms of the caliphal dynasty's Sunni Islam such as Shias, Alawites, Alavis and Yazidis had no official status and were considered to be part of the Muslim millet. Only the syncretic Druze of the Jebel Druze and Mount Lebanon enjoyed feudal-type autonomy. These groups were spread across the empire with significant minorities in most of the major cities. Autonomy for these groups was thus impossible to base on a territorial region. Orthodox Christians The Orthodox Christians were included in the Rum millet, or the Roman nation conquered by Islam but enjoying a certain autonomy. It was named after Byzantine subjects of the Ottoman Empire, but Orthodox Greeks, Bulgarians, Albanians, Georgians, Arabs, Vlachs and Serbs were all considered part of the same millet despite their differences in ethnicity and language and despite the fact that the religious hierarchy was Greek-dominated. Nevertheless, ethnonyms never disappeared and some form of ethnic identity was preserved as evident from a sultan's firman from 1680, that lists the ethnic groups on the Balkan lands as follows: Greeks, Albanians, Serbs, Vlachs and Bulgarians. The Ecumenical Patriarch was recognized as the highest religious and political leader of all Orthodox subjects of the Sultan, though in certain periods some major powers, such as Russia or Britain, claimed the rights of protection over the Ottoman Empire's Orthodox subjects. The Patriarchate and the Archbishopric of Ohrid, which were autonomous Orthodox churches under the tutelage of the Ecumenical Patriarch, were taken over by the Greek Phanariotes during the 18th century. in 1766 and 1767 respectively. Armenians . Until the 19th century, there was a single Armenian millet which served all ethnic Armenians irrespective of whether they belonged to the Armenian Apostolic Church, the Armenian Catholic Church or the Armenian Protestant Church. Only later did a separate Catholic millet emerge. Non-Armenians from churches which were theologically linked to the Armenian Church were under the authority of the Armenian Patriarchate, although they maintained a separate hierarchy with their own patriarchs. These groups included the Syriac Orthodox and the Copts. Syriac Orthodox . The Syriac Orthodox started out under the Armenian Patriarchate but petitioned the Sublime Porte for separate status, mainly as Western contacts allowed them a voice of their own. Thus the Syriac Apostolic Church of Antioch and all the East received recognition as a separate community millet, as did the Chaldean Catholic Church, the Syriac Catholic and the Millet of the Church of the East. The last was the most remote of the churches in distance from the Porte. Jews . Under the millet system, the Jews were organized as a community on the basis of religion, alongside the other millets. In the framework of the millet they had a considerable amount of administrative autonomy and were represented by the Hakim Bashi, who held broad powers to legislate, judge and enforce the laws among the Jews in the Ottoman Empire and often sat on the Sultan's divan. The Ottoman Jews enjoyed similar privileges to those of the Orthodox. The city of Thessaloniki received a great influx of Jews in the 15th century and soon flourished economically to such an extent that, during the 18th century, it was the largest and possibly the most prosperous Jewish city in the world. The Jews, like the other millet communities of the Ottoman Empire, were still considered a people of the book and protected by the Sharia law of Islam. However, while the Jews were not viewed in the eyes of the law to be on an equal playing field with Muslims, they were still treated relatively well at points during the Ottoman Empire. Norman Stillman explains that the prosperity of medieval Jews was closely tied to that of their Muslim governors. Stillman references the time between the 9th and 13th centuries in which Jewish culture blossomed as medieval Islamic civilization was at its apogee. That is not to say that the Jews weren't persecuted during this time and that as the empire declined in centuries to come the Jews' condition did not worsen. However, given their rampant persecution in medieval Europe, many Jews looked favorably upon millet. In the late 19th century such groups as the Bialu, a group of young Russian Jews who were pioneers of the Zionist resettlement of Palestine, proposed negotiating with the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire to allow a millet-like settlement. That is not to say that they sought to replace the old Jewish millet system, for they sought much greater independence. However, it is important to note that the Zionist movement did not reject the millet system in its beginning. Following the collapse of the Ottoman Empire in the wake of World War I, Palestine came under the control of the British Empire, who decided to create the State of Israel. The millet system that Israel adopted upon its independence was a highly pluralized and decentralized legal system under which the Ottoman and British imperial authorities granted juridical autonomy over matters of personal status to 11 ethno-religious communities in Palestine. The reasoning behind Israel's implementation of such a system upon its religious and ethnic minorities remains unclear. From an ideological standpoint, it is surprising that the Israeli government, a Jewish state, advocates a system of government modeled in many ways off the same millet system which once represented the oppression and persecution of Jews. Furthermore, this approach to the governance of their state has been met with a great deal of criticism by both those inside Israel and those in surrounding Arab countries. Yuxel Sezgin, a professor of comparative politics at the City University of New York, claims that Israel has not attempted to put an end to the multiplicity of religious courts and unify them under a network of national courts, as Egypt did in 1955. Nor has it ever tried to abolish the religious personal status laws of various communities and enact a secular and uniform civil code in their place. Rather, it has maintained a modified form of old millet system in which religious courts of 14 state-recognized communities, staffed with their very own communal judges who apply religious and customary laws of their own communities, are granted exclusive jurisdiction over matters of marriage and divorce and concurrent jurisdiction with the civil courts in regard to issues of maintenance and succession. In other words, Israel utilized the old millet system in the nation-building process as an instrument of vertical segmentation and horizontal homogenization. The new notion Sazjan suggests of Israel's government as a new millet system should not be confused with the millet system of medieval Islam. Under the Ottoman millet system, for example, a Jew's word would always mean less than a Muslim's in a court of law. Members of the millets were truly second-class citizens who were legally inferior to Muslims. Israel's new millet is more a practice of separate but equal, in which all members of the state are equal but subject to different legal systems according to religion and ethnicity. While the claim may be made that Israel's system lacks modernity, it is perhaps a step too far drawing a comparison between it and a medieval theocratic structure of government. Roman Catholics After the fall of Constantinople, the only Latin Catholic group to be incorporated into the Sultan's domain were the Genoese, who lived in the Byzantine capital. Over the next decades, Turkish armies pushed into the Balkans, overrunning the Catholic population of Albania, Bulgaria, Bosnia and Hungary. In the Orient, the 16th century saw the Maronites of Lebanon, the Latins of Palestine and most of the Greek islands, which once held Latin Catholic communities, come under Turkish rule. Papal response to the loss of these communities was initially a call to the crusade, but the response from the European Catholic monarchs was weak. French interest, however, lay in an alliance with the Turks against the Habsburgs. As a bonus, the Catholics of the Ottoman world received a protectorate, the Porte, in the person of the French ambassador. In this way, the Roman Catholic millet was established at the start of the Tanzimat reforms. History: millets are recorded as early as the 4th century in the Persian Sassanid Empire, which was primarily Zoroastrian. The early Christians there were forming the Church of the East. The Church of the East's leader, the Catholicos or Patriarch of the East, was responsible to the Persian king for the Christians within the empire. This system of maintaining the Christians as a protected religious community continued after the Islamic conquest of the Sassanids, and the community of Nestorian Christians flourished and was able to send missionaries far past the empire's borders, reaching as far as China and India. Ottoman establishment In the Ottoman Empire, Christian millets were instituted by Sultan Mehmed II after he had conquered Constantinople in 1453 and set himself to reorganize the Ottoman state as the conscious heir of the East Roman Empire. They are national corporations with written charters, often of an elaborate kind. Each of them is presided over by a patriarch, who holds office at the discretion of the government, but is elected by the community and is the recognized intermediary between the two, combining in his own person the headship of a voluntary Rao association and the status of an Ottoman official. The special function thus assigned to the patriarchates gives the millets, as an institution, an ecclesiastical character. 220. And the authority of the patriarchates extends to the control of schools, and even to the administration of certain branches of civil law. 19th century New millets were created in the 19th century for several Uniate and Protestant Christian communities, then for the separate Eastern Orthodox Bulgarian Church, recognized as a Bulgar millet by an Ottoman firman in 1870 and excommunicated 2 years later by the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate as adherents of Philotism. In the period before World War I there were 17 millets within the empire. Reformulation into Ottomanism. Before the turn of the 19th century, the millets had a great deal of power. They set their own laws and collected and distributed their own taxes. Tanzimat reforms aimed to encourage Ottomanism among the secessionist subject nations and stop the rise of nationalist movements within the Ottoman Empire, but failed to succeed despite trying to integrate non-Muslims and non-Turks more thoroughly into the Ottoman society with new laws and regulations. With the Tanzimat era, the regulation called Regulation of the Armenian Nation was introduced on March 29, 1863, over the millet organization, which granted extensive privileges and autonomy concerning self-governance. The Armenian nation, Military Armenia Senten, which is considered here, is the Armenian Orthodox Gregorian nation of that time. In a very short time, the Ottoman Empire passed another regulation over Nisa Sentmna Sentmai Military Armenio Senten developed by the Patriarchate Assemblies of Armenians, which was named as the Islet Firma Sentnar ±. The firman of the reforms gave immense privileges to the Armenians, which formed a governance to eliminate the aristocratic dominance of the Armenian nobles by development of the political strata in the society. These two reforms, which were theoretically perfect examples of social change by law, brought serious stress over Ottoman political and administrative structure. Effect of protectorate of missions. The Ottoman system lost the mechanisms of its existence from the assignment of protection of citizen rights of their subjects to other states. People were not citizens of the Ottoman Empire anymore but of other states, due to the capitulations of the Ottoman Empire to European powers, protecting the rights of their citizens within the empire. The Russians became formal protectors of Eastern Orthodox groups, the French of Roman Catholics and the British of Jews and other groups. Russia and England competed for the Armenians. The Eastern Orthodox perceived American Protestants, who had over 100 missionaries established in Anatolia by World War I, as weakening their own teaching. These religious activities, subsidized by the governments of Western nations, were not devoid of political goals, such in the case of Candlestick Wars of 1847. Tension began among the Catholic and Orthodox monks in Palestine with France channeling resources to increase its influence in the region from 1840. Repairs to shrines were important for the sects as they were linked to the possession of keys to the temples. Notes were given by the protectorates, including the French, to the Ottoman capital about the governor. He was condemned as he had to defend the Church of the Holy Sepulchre by placing soldiers inside the temple because of the Candlestick Wars, eliminating the change of keys. Successive Ottoman governments had issued edicts granting primacy of access to different Christian groups which vied for control of Jerusalem's holy sites. Effect of nationalism. Under the original design, the multi-faced structure of the millet system was unified under the House of Osman. The rise of nationalism in Europe under the influence of the French Revolution had extended to the Ottoman Empire during the 19th century. Each millet became increasingly independent with the establishment of its own schools, churches, hospitals and other facilities. These activities effectively moved the Christian population outside the framework of the Ottoman political system. The Ottoman millet system began to degrade with the continuous identification of the religious creed with ethnic nationality. The interaction of ideas of French Revolution with the Ottoman millet system created a breed of thought which turned the concept of nationalism synonymous with religion under the Ottoman flag. It was impossible to hold the system or prevent clash of civilizations when the Armenian national liberation movement expressed itself within the Armenian Church. Patriarch Nurses Varjabedian expresses his position on Ottoman Armenians to British Minister of Foreign Affairs, Lord Salisbury on April 13, 1878. It is no longer possible for the Armenians and the Turks to live together. Only a Christian administration can provide the equality, justice and the freedom of conscience. A Christian administration should replace the Muslim administration. Armenia and Kalaikia are the regions where the Christian administration should be founded. The Turkish Armenians want this. That is, a Christian administration is demanded in Turkish Armenia, as in Lebanon. Modern use equals. Today the millet system is still used at varying degrees in some post-Ottoman countries like Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Israel, the Palestinian Authority, Egypt, and Greece. It is also in use in states like India, Iran, Pakistan and Bangladesh which observe the principle of separate personal courts and all laws for every recognized religious community and reserved seats in the parliament. In Egypt for instance, the application of family law including marriage, divorce, alimony, child custody, inheritance and burial is based on an individual's religious beliefs. In the practice of family law, the state recognizes only the three heavenly religions Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. Muslim families are subject to the personal status law, which draws on Sharia. Christian families are subject to canon law, and Jewish families are subject to Jewish law. In cases of family law disputes involving a marriage between a Christian woman and a Muslim man, the courts apply the personal status law. Israel, too, keeps a system based on the Ottoman-derived millet, in which personal status is based on a person's belonging to a religious community. the State of Israel a euro on the basis of laws inherited from Ottoman times and retained both under British rule and by independent Israel a euro reserves the right to recognize some communities but not others. Thus, Orthodox Judaism is officially recognized in Israel, while Reform rabbis and conservative rabbis are not recognized and cannot perform marriages. Israel recognized the Druze as a separate community, which the Ottomans and British had not a euro due mainly to political considerations. Also, the State of Israel reserves the right to determine to which community a person belongs, and officially register him or her accordingly a euro even when the person concerned objects to being part of a religious community. Israeli secularists such as Shulamit Eilani and Uri Avneri often protested and called for abolition of this Ottoman remnant, and its replacement by a system modeled on that of the United States where religious affiliation is considered a person's private business in which the state should not interfere. However, all such proposals have been defeated. Greece recognizes only a Muslim minority, and no ethnic or national minorities, such as Turks, Punks or Slavo-Macedonians. This is the result of the Convention concerning the exchange of Greek and Turkish populations of 1923 and of the Treaty of Lausanne of 1924, when the old millet categories were used for the forced population exchanges of the Greek Orthodox Christians from Turkey and Muslims from Greece, as well as for the protection of the two remaining recognized minorities, the Muslims of Western Thrace, and the Greek Orthodox of Istanbul. Current meaning of the word. Today, the word millet means nation in Turkish, for example ta 1/4 ak milleti, a degree ingeles milleti, etc. It also retains its use as a religious and ethnic classification. It can also be used as a slang to classify people belonging to a particular group, such as demue a section u milleti or kada plus or minus a milleti. See also, Culture of the Ottoman Empire, History of the Ottoman Empire, Divaim system, Jizayur. References. Sources: Ottoman Empire site, German full original version. Further reading: Benjamin Broad and Bernard Lewis, Christians and Jews in the Ottoman Empire. The Functioning of a Plural Society, 2 vol, New York and London 1982. Joseph Metus, Das Osmanische Reich. Grundlinien seiner Geschichte, Darmstadt, Wissenschaftliche Buchgesellschaft, 1985. Bernard Lewis, Die Juden in der Islamischen Welt. Vom Fra 1/4 hen Mittelalter bis ins 20. Jahrhundert, Ma 1/4 nchen, Beck, 1987, Passim. Dimitris Stamatopoulos, A Euro-OE from Millets to Minorities in the 19th Euro-century Ottoman Empire, An Ambiguous Modernization a Euro, in S. G. Ellis, G. Halfadnasen, A. K. Isaacs, Citizenship in Historical Perspective, Pisa, Edizioni plus a Euro Pisa University Press, 2006, 253 a Euro 273, http, www.cleorasnet 7/21 pdf, Henry Blunt, A Voyage into the Levant, Amsterdam 1977. Originally titled, A Voyage into the Levant. A Brief Relation of a Journey. Lately performed by Master H. B. Gentleman, from England by the way of Venice, into Dalmatia, Scrivonia, Bosnia, Hungary, Macedonia, Thessaly, Thrace, Rhodes and Egypt, unto Grand Cairo, with particular observations concerning the modern condition of the Turks, and other people under that empire. London, 1636. Michael Ursinus, Zur Diskussion um Euro Militär Euro am Osmanischen Reich, in Zar 1/4 Dostafos 148, pages 195 a Euro 207, Nicola Melis, a Euro OE il concetto di Hada Euro, in P. Manducci, Dalla Penna al Mouse. Gli strumenti di diffusion del concetto di jihad, Angeli, Milano 2006, pages 23 a Euro 54. Nicola Melis, a Euro OE lo statuto giuridico degli ebrei della Euro unregistered trademark Impero Ottomano a Euro, in M. Comtu a Euro N. Melis a Euro G. Pinna, Abraismo e rapporti con la cultura del Mediterraneo nei secoli 1820, Giuntina, Firenze 2003. Nicola Melis, Trattato sulla guerra. Il Kita Bialai Hadidi Molaha 1/4 Rev. Ipsa, Cagliari 2002 Benjamin Broad and Bernard Lewis, Christians and Jews in the Ottoman Empire. The Functioning of a Plural Society, 2 vol, New York and London 1982. Erwin Semilskik, Uzmana plus or minus Lam, Aza plus or minus NLA plus or minus Claveya Udala, Uzman, Minorita Currency 10 Juden, in, Tarive Toplum 29, 34 Euro 42. Elizabeth A. Zacariado, Coexistence and Religion, in, Archivum Ottomanicum 15, 119 Euro 29. Batye Cubed R., The Dhimmi, Jews and Christians under Islam, Cranberry, New Jersey, 1985. Yusuf Corbett and Philippe Fargus, Christians and Jews under Islam, translated by Judy Maybro, London and New York, 1997. Karl bin Swainer, Unter Chungen zum Status der Nicht-Muslim im Osmanischen Reich Day 16. Jahrhunderts mit einer neuen Definition des Begriffes Dhimmi, Ma 1/4 NCHEN 1977. Yavuz Erkan, Uzmana plus or minus Ya paragraph Natim and Gerima 1/4 Slimla. Kurulamartan Tanzimata Akadar Suzul, Economic Vehukiki Duamara plus or minus, Die Nicht-Muslim in der Osmanischen Verwaltung. Sozial, Wirtschaftlich und Rechtlich von der Gra 1/4 Dung bis Tanzimat, Ankara 2001. Parrott, Rudy, Tolerance and Intolerance in Islam, in, Curriculum 21, 344 Euro 65. Bilalaya plus or minus LMAZ, Uzmana plus or minus Devlet and Gerima 1/4 Slim Tiba Anna plus or minus Anya paragraph Natimi, Die Verwaltung der Nicht-Muslimischen und dem Osmanischen Reich, A Degree Istanbul 1990, pages 215 Euro 18. Vikret Adana plus or minus R, Der Zerfall des Osmanischen Reichs, in, Das and der Weltreich, von dem Persen bis zur Sowjetunion, HRSG. Von Alexander Dement, Ma 1/4 NCHEN 1997, S 108 Euro 28. Ramsor, Ernest Edmondson Jr., The Young Turks. Prelude to the Revolution of 1908, Tuat, A Degree Istanbul 1982, pages 40 Euro 1, ANM 30, Euro Mi Avrata Euro, Paris, 3. December 1895. Vikret Adana plus or minus R, Die Makedonische Frage, Ernstehung und Entwicklung bis 1908, Wiesbaden 1979, pages 93. Johannes Lepsius, and others, Die Gruelpolitik der Europakurrenziischen Kabinett 1871 Euro 1914. Sammlung der Diplomatischen Akten des Currency RTIGENMs, Berlin 1923 Euro 29, Volume 18, Tel I, pages 169. Fatma Ma 1/4 Gar paragraph a section ek, Bujuvazan in Ya 1/4 Xeliari, A Degree Imperatal IA paragraph Car 1/4 Ya 1/4. Uzmana plus or minus Bata plus or minus La plus or minus Limasa plus or minus Ve Toplum Zildayim, Rise of the Bourgeoisie, Decline of the Empires. Ottoman Westernization and Social Change, Ankara 1999, pages 307 Euro 09, Al-Qaeda, Bureaucracy and Bourgeoisie, Reform and Revolution in the Age of Imperialism, in, Review, 11, 2, Spring 1988, pages 151 Euro 65. Roderick H. Davison, Turkish Attitudes Concerning Christiano-Muslim Equality in the 19th Century, in, American Historical Review 59, pages 844 Euro 864. Bernard Lewis, Der Untergang des Morgenlands. Warum die Islamische Welt Vormacht Welle, Bonn 2002, pages 99. Bernard Lewis, Stern, Krause und Halbmond. 2000 Judgeschick des Nahen Ostens, Ma 1/4 NCHEN, Zar 1/4 Rich 1995, pages 302. Ortele plus or minus, A Degree LBER. Sun A Degree Imperatorluk Uzmana plus or minus, A Degree Istanbul, Tamariya plus or minus NLARA plus or minus, 2006. ISBN 975-263-490-7, Ortaler plus or minus, a degree LBER. Uzmana plus or minus Bara plus or minus YA plus or minus, a degree Istanbul, Tamariya plus or minus NLARA plus or minus, 2007. ISBN 978-975-263-516-6, Dimitri Kitsikis, Ta 1 quarter a K Unan a degree Mparatolu. Araba paragraph LG Gira section area plus or minus YA plus or minus AR plus or minus Ndar Usmana plus or minus Tarihin Barka plus or minus Y, the Turco-Greek Empire. A study of Ottoman history from the point of view of the intermediate region, a degree Istanbul, a degree Leşayim, 1996. ISBN 975-470-504-6.